A brief history of the Alberta oil sands. What exactly are the oil sands? Oil sands refer to a type of unconventional petroleum deposit. They are comprised of a watery mixture of clay and sand soaked with a dense, viscous form of petroleum called bitumen. These deposits were formed millions of years ago from marine organisms that were covered by layers of sediment and underwent enough pressure and heat to transform them into oil. Bitumen is especially difficult to extract because of how deposits vary in depth. Shallow deposits can be dug out with extremely large open pits, while deeper reserves are accessed by building deep shafts. Steam is then used to heat up the bitumen, and the deposits are then pumped out. Indigenous Cree people first brought bitumen to the fur traders in the 1700s, when it was used to waterproof canoes. But it was not until 1967 that scientific advances and the need for fuel led to the establishment of industrial oil exploitation and the opening of the Great Canadian Oil Sands Project, now known as Suncor Oil. As the world's largest industrial project, the gravity and scale of the Alberta oil sands can be hard to grasp. Alberta alone accounts for over 80% of Canadian oil sands and 63% of all Canadian oil production, producing almost 3 million barrels per day. Alberta is the third largest proven oil reserve in the world, containing an estimated 170 billion recoverable barrels with current technology and an additional 140 billion recoverable barrels with developing technology. Financially, Canada relies heavily on the oil sands, and it is estimated that there is $325 billion in capital investment in this industry. The three largest oil sands in Alberta include Peace River, Cold Lake, and Athabasca. North of Fort McMurray, near Lake Athabasca and the Peace Athabasca Delta, the bitumen layer is shallow enough that it can be strip-mined in huge open pits, causing an immense environmental impact and adversely affecting the health of the First Nations community in the surrounding area. Downstream of the oil sands, Indigenous peoples are experiencing an increase in cardiovascular problems, respiratory diseases, and rare cancers that are believed to be caused by toxic substances leaching from the nearby oil sands production. According to Dr. Kevin Timney, a water researcher and ecologist who conducted an independent study of the area in 2008, the three contaminants of most concern are arsenic, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and mercury. When you put arsenic and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons together, the carcinogen effect can increase by 8 to 18-fold, and this is exactly what we have seen in the water and sediments of the Athabasca River and in the Delta. The oil and toxic substances present in the watersheds has led to arsenic contamination of moose meat, an important dietary staple of the local First Nations people. Moose meat in the area has been found to contain up to 33 times the acceptable levels of arsenic. Carcinogens and toxins have also been found in the fish, waterfowl, beavers, moose, and muskrat in the areas downstream from the oil sands. In fact, 6 to 7% of fish caught at Fort Chipewyan First Nations, an Indigenous community located at the northwestern tip of Lake Athabasca, have lip or skin carcinomas. Fish in the Delta have also been found with tumors the size of golf balls and other abnormal deformities. Fish in the lake have also tested positive for elevated mercury levels. The high levels of mercury have inhibited human consumption of the local fish and have halted the lake's fishing industry that many First Nations depend upon. The First Nations' preservation of a traditional way of life and maintenance of a healthy lifestyle is being threatened as a result of the impacts of the oil sands. In conjunction with the pace and scale of development and the lack of consultation with local Indigenous groups prior to development of the oil sands, has resulted in an emerging number of legal actions being taken by Indigenous groups against the Alberta government, Canadian government, and big oil industries. Alberta is comprised of Treaties 6, 7, and 8 territory, and is home to 43 First Nations communities, 40 of which fall under Treaties 6 and 8 and reside in close proximity to oil sand developments. The impact of the oil sands on the region's First Nations is in violation of Treaties 6 and 8, which were signed by First Nations people in 1876 and 1899. The treaties surrendered over 1 million square kilometers of what is now central and northern Alberta, as well as areas of British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories to the federal government. In return, the First Nations were guaranteed to retain their hunting, trapping, and fishing rights in support of sustaining their traditional livelihood. These rights were further affirmed by the Constitution Act of 1982 and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. We were assured that our way of life would not be changed and that it would be protected, stated Chief Alan Adam of Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation and Chief Roxanne Marcel of Mikisew Cree First Nation. Some of the legal actions proposed by First Nations communities have included Chippewa and Prairie Dene First Nation filing legal action against the Alberta government in 2008. This action called out the Alberta government for breaching the province's constitutional responsibility to consult with First Nations on the Christina Lake Regional Project, which is planned to be built on CPDFN traditional territory. The successful 2010 Supreme Court application by Duncan First Nation and Horse Lake First Nation to intervene in tar sand extractions on Treaty 8 territory. Again, provincial government and oil regulators failed to properly consult Indigenous communities in regards to oil and sand extraction. The 2010 intervention by Beaver Lake Cree Nation and Athabasca Chippewa First Nation for the federal government to adhere to legal responsibilities under the Species at Risk Act to protect the woodland caribou, a threatened species, from industrial development. And a 2020 Alberta Court Appeal decision to quash an oil sands project north of Fort McMurray for failing to address the interests and concerns of the Fort McKay First Nation. Canada is aiming for net zero by 2050 and is advocating a championship of climate action. Yet oil sand production hit an all-time high in November 2020. At the current rate of development, oil sand production is expected to triple by 2030. Clearly, the oil sands have had a devastating impact on both the environment and Indigenous communities. Moving forward, it is the potential magnitude of future developments that will exponentially reap catastrophic and irreversible levels of environmental destruction and effects on Indigenous traditional livelihoods. Though oil production is on the rise, the Biden administration's cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, outsized environmental and health impacts, a drop in oil prices in recent years, and high cost of production have shifted both the public and private investors' support of the oil sands. It is unclear how much longer the world will continue to support one of the fossil fuel industry's most polluting and least economical sectors.